Thank you very much for sharing your insights into the future of technology. But before we look at technology, can you share with us a little bit about your own background? Where did you grow up?
Sure. So I grew up in a very wet part of the British countryside, just partly between England and Wales, where there are an awful lot more sheep than there are people. I went to school in a local school and went through to university in Wales, which is also very wet and also full of a lot of sheep. So you're beginning to sense a theme here.
Right.
I read economics at university. I went on to join Ford Motor Company in their supply chain division. A little later I joined Barclays, and as a consequence of my role with Barclays, we began to look at acquiring some overseas interests. For a while I was the global CIO for Barclays. And during that time, we identified ABSA as one of the banks that we were interested in buying. So I came down to South Africa about 13 or so years ago as part of the original deal team to pull the acquisition of ABSA off. And I've been here ever since, predominantly because it's sunny and there aren't so many sheep.
And tell me, as you grew up, what was your dream career?
I wanted to be an antiques dealer.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. So I've always loved history. I've always loved furniture and art and aesthetics. And my parents were also antique dealers. It just felt to me like what I wanted to do, drive around the countryside in a battered old Volvo, buying and selling antiques.
And what era were you especially interested in?
17th century English furniture predominantly, maybe going right the way through into the Chippendale era, sort of 1720, 1750.
Okay. So what or who inspired you during your career, and maybe in the early stages?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. I remember meeting an incredibly charismatic Brazilian gentleman called Carlos, who used to be the vice president of Ford's supply chain division, going back many, many years ago, early 90s. And I remember he came onto stage with this kind of dry ice and the roll of drums, and he spoke so incisively and insightfully around the future as he saw it and what we were doing. I thought, wow, I want to work for this guy. So that was one of the most inspirational people I can remember meeting in my very early parts of my career, just realising actually that big global businessmen need to talk about big global issues and really understand the place that they're operating in. So very interesting and very inspiring individual.
So was he speaking about the future of society?
He was talking about, no, not of society, but rather where he saw the automotive world going into the immediate future. I would probably look back on that speech 25 years ago and say he got almost everything wrong, but that's okay. At least he had a vision. Right. I don't think any of us 25 years ago would really have understood what automobiles are today. So, but a very interesting individual, very interesting indeed.
So Ian, what would you say was a major turning point in your career?
I think for me, the real kind of turning point was beginning to understand that you didn't have to be a specialist in everything. You just needed to understand how to access other people's expertise to get things done. So moving from this kind of universe of one where you do everything yourself because you're very good at it, to a universe of many where you've actually got to get a lot of different things done through the efforts, the insights, the brains of other people. And I think that for me was a massive, massive moment. And it probably came 15, 16 years ago when I began to lead people for the first time. And a lot of people, as you lead people for the first time, your default mechanism is if they don't do it for you, you go back and do it yourself. But that's not a sustainable way of actually running a business, because otherwise you just disappear. I mean, you can't manage all that workload yourself. So I think that leadership journey, the journey of helping to understand how you bring people with you has been the most important part of my leadership journey.
So you believe in co-creation?
I believe in co-creation 100%. I mean, if I'm the smartest person in the room, then I have a problem. So I absolutely, really, genuinely believe in trying to bring a lot of very bright people together to come up with different ideas. Absolutely. And the people around you need to own the vision of where you're going. They need to own the solution to the problem. If you keep on telling them what the answer is, then there's no buy-in, there's no ownership of that.
And Ian, what is driving you today?
I think driving most people today, I want to make a real difference and create a different way of thinking about the businesses that I'm involved with. At the moment I'm involved in the technology sector. I really want to be able to build a business which is demonstratively successful and demonstratively different from my competitors. It's very simple.
Now let's look into the future of technology. What does the future of technology mean to you?
I mean, that's a huge question, and if I knew the full answer to that, I probably wouldn't be sitting in this room today, but I'd be making an awful lot more money somewhere else in the world. I mean, I think the reality is that for us in South Africa, the future of technology is about blending a lot of the great research and development done overseas, and then bringing a very unique South African flavour to how we do it. There's a big difference between invention and innovation. We really struggle in a relatively small economy to be able to have the R&D expenditure for the invention bit. But what we're brilliant at here is the innovation, taking an invention and doing something new, unique and different with it. So for me, and the future of technology right now is about how do we take some of the fascinating research and development work that's coming out and innovate with that to make things different, whether it's about a business-to-business kind of technology or whether it's a business-to-consumer technology.
Okay. And what have you learned from your own journey that you would say is really important for building future leaders, future technology leaders?
I am not sure that somebody like myself, late 40s, very simple, straightforward background, worked their way through the corporate ladder over the last 20 or so years, is actually somebody who really understands where technology is going to go. So how do we bring a diversity of view and a diversity of background into the leadership team? So people, and there's a terrible term out there called digital native, but people that have been brought up with digital technology from the get-go, much younger than I am, much different background, they're very important to what's going on. People from diverse backgrounds who are not from a technology company background are really important. Because if you don't understand how technology can be used in a retail environment or in a hospital, then how can we be successful? We can't second guess that. So what I'm really looking for as I build a leadership team that's useful and capable of driving change is a diversity of background. And that's not an age, gender, race diversity, it's just genuinely different insight points, different experience sets that come together in a very thoughtful way to sort of co-create, to use your word, a view of where we can get to.
Reminds me of Steve Jobs, who said at one stage he had a team of, I think, zoologists, humanists, historians, and so on. Very diverse.
It really worries me that if you are a technology company full of technologists, you'll never design anything useful. Because you've got to be out there in the real world understanding what our customers use things for and need. So what business problem are we solving? Well, if you haven't worn the shoes of somebody, how do you know how it feels to walk like that? So we've really got to understand what it feels to operate a hospital, to run a big financial services business, to actually be in a branch of a Pick and Pay or a ShopRite. We really need to understand that, to know what business problem we're trying to solve, and then we can apply some of the background that we have in technology to solving those issues.
Now, Ian, when you speak to aspiring leaders and maybe even your own children, what do you tell them they should focus on to future-proof their career, if that's possible?
I think the only thing that you can do to future-proof yourself is to have a mind as open as it can possibly be. The second that you cloud your mind with prejudice and with a lens which has got your kind of particular bias on it or your own experience set, you start to close out the area of opportunity. I mean, you talk about children. If you talk to a 5, 6, 7-year-old, and I have several at home, if you talk to them, they're unfettered, they're unbound by the reality of some of the background that we have, the experience sets that we have. And they are much more inventive, they're much more creative. Now, how do we keep that almost naivety and the open-mindedness of the 5 or 6-year-old to keep on questioning why we do things the way that we do? So anybody that I want to hire, I want to have that breadth of vision and that really open-mindedness. Leave the prejudice at the door, leave your personal bias behind, open your mind up to what we can really achieve.
So would you agree that we should focus on technologies that enable kids to live their dream, to pursue their dream?
Yeah, sure, but I don't think it's just about technology either. I think if you just create that open-mindedness in any field, then you start to create a very different way of being able to be successful.
So looking into the future, Ian, what are the key technologies that you envisage will be driving the future of humanity?
At the moment, we're seeing 2 or 3 very, very key trends. I mean, firstly, the ability to connect almost anything to anything. So this convergence of very small devices, which are then connected and can either actively make decisions for you or passively, talk about what's happened in the past. What people like to call this Internet of Things construct, for us is a critical play. Now, we play much more in the industrial Internet of Things. So how do we make businesses work more effectively by literally joining the dots? That, for me, is only going to get more and more pervasive and more invasive as every part of our life, every part of our business has different types of sensors and technology around it. Now, once you've done that, what are you going to do with all that information that you've now received? So the next big area that we see developing very fast, and BCX is a very large data science, data analytics team right now, is the ability to take data and create insights from the data that you can do something useful with. There's no point just having loads of data. Data is just sitting there, right? So only clever people doing clever things to create insights that allow you to be more effective, more efficient, make a different marketing decision, whatever it may be. So data science, data analytics, data engineering, a massive, massive growth area for us. And that in turn will enable whole new levels of productivity and efficiency. So that's a huge issue. So the industrial Internet of Things, the Internet of Things, all those devices connected becomes critical. The leveraging and the use of that data is critical. The third part of that story, though, is how do we keep all that stuff secure? So every single device that you now connect to the network creates another point of exposure for you, for somebody else to hack into that network and take the information or find a point of weakness. So a critical area that we've got to really unpack and develop is how do we put, in fact, what people call cyber security around this great big new network that we're building. And there are different ways of doing that. So the third big area that we're seeing at the moment is a very significant growth in how we keep people safe.
There's a view that anything can be hacked.
I think that's probably right, providing you've got enough time and you have enough energy and the will to do so. What's very interesting on a lot of the cyber security breaches you see, it's not a breach of the security put in place by the technology people that's the challenge. It's the human element in the chain where somebody has divulged a password, they're using their child's birth date, whatever it may be. It's actually the bulk of the breaches and the vulnerability at the moment are coming from the human interaction. The latest cyber security trends are moving away from having any human intervention to take away that weakness, which becomes very interesting. And as you get into qubits and quantum computing, then you're into a whole different level of ability to crack codes and access networks and things anyway. So we've got to make sure that, if people can get access to the quantum computing capability, the cyber security codes and protocols themselves are being set by those same quantum computers. So you're kind of in this arms race, right, of ever increasing, exponentially increasing computing power.
Now, Ian, when you speak to future leaders, what social media platforms do you advise them they should use to build their personal brand, to communicate?
That's a very, very interesting question indeed. So when we hire people and we use external headhunters, they'll often do a social media scan for us of the individual's activities, and it's a way of flagging up issues and risks. It's also a way of flagging up a much more rounded picture of the individual, their hobbies, their interests, and so on and so forth. My personal view is be professional wherever you are, and wherever you are, be professional. It is almost that straightforward. And it's very difficult for all of us. I mean, what we do at home is very different from what we do in the workplace. There are the professional social media sites like LinkedIn where you want to project one persona. But if you're going to completely unwrap that by pictures of you on a night out crawling along the gutter because you've drunk too much and being sick in Joburg CBD on Facebook, it's not going to help you very much. So you've got to have some congruence between your profiles and some real integrity and authenticity there. And if that's problematic, then think about having less profiles.
And maybe have a clean mind, first and foremost.
Yeah, I couldn't possibly comment.
Now, Ian, as a chief disruptor, I think that's one of your titles, I'm sure you're mentoring many future leaders. Can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored a youngster, that person took your advice to heart and achieved significant success?
When I do a lot of mentoring, it's something that's critical. If we don't invest in the talent of the future, then I think our future is going to be much poorer for it. So I do an awful lot of mentoring. And I don't think there's one great big success story, there's one great big sort of trick or tool. It's about being interested in people, it's about listening to people, and it's about trying to allow them to discover themselves, and that's what I do, I let people talk. Sure, you can put a bit of framework around it, what I call scaffolding, how do I scaffold somebody to become more successful. We've had a couple of great examples where we've had some very young talent programs in the last 3 or 4 years in the group, most notably probably the Bright Young Minds, where we brought in 10 people recruited entirely through a social media campaign, entirely due to attitude and aptitude, nothing to do with formal qualifications. And that cadre of people have become very successful, and I deliberately spent a lot of time with them. They're all 25, 26, they're young, they're bright, they're ambitious. All you have to do is listen and actually just gently sometimes put a bit of scaffolding around them to say, have you thought about X? Or I can give you an opportunity to experience Y. That's all you need to do. And these kids are flying. They're absolutely flying. It's an incredibly rewarding thing to do. Occasionally you get the odd person that doesn't engage, doesn't want to be part of that, and then you have to understand, so what have I done that didn't allow me to open up that relationship or open up that person's mind? And that's more problematic than I learn more from that sometimes than from the success stories. But it's an ongoing passion of mine. I spend a huge amount of time both on talent acquisition and
And who would you say are the role models of leadership that future leaders should study? Or maybe books?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of books, and I'm not a fan of stereotyping role models. I'm probably going to be quite awkward in my answer to this one, to be honest with you. People need to find themselves. They really do, and it sounds so simple. But I'm not another Steve Jobs. I'm not another Larry Ellison. I'm not another Bill Gates. I'm Ian. Okay, I'm me. And what I do to make me successful is not what other people do to make themselves successful. We think differently, we behave differently, and I think you've got to find yourself. That's the most important thing.
So Ian, where can people or how can people get hold of you, and where can they follow your thought leadership?
Sure. So going back to our social media question, I have a LinkedIn profile where I try and post some of my more relevant views and thoughts on what's going on out there and some of the things that we've been talking about locally. And you can also go to the main BCX website, which is bcx.co.za, where you'll also find quite a lot of our white papers and thought leadership papers on technology trends and so on.
And last but not least, is there one piece of advice that you would like to give future leaders they should implement in their own leadership?
I'd probably two or three. I think number one, always keep your mind open. The less that you can cloud your judgment with prejudice and bias or experience, the better. So an open mind is absolutely essential, number one. Number two, and it's very troubling for some youth, this point, but unfortunately success still tends to be 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. There is no substitute for working hard. And a lot of people think that success falls into your lap. It happens very occasionally. The reality is you've got to be prepared to work really hard, but that 10% inspiration, when it comes, grab it and run with it like hell. So an open mind, work hard, and can keep on dreaming. For as long as you're dreaming, then you have something that you're following in terms of your North Star that guides you, and that is so important.
Well, Ian, thank you so much. You truly are an inspiration, and you're helping us to build a better future through technology. So I really want to thank you. I want to thank you for your wisdom, and I want to thank you for your inspiration.